we were the #1 TV show in Russia for almost 11 years. The mafia guys, all had girlfriends that loved the show. And, they were just unbelievably kind to me. They go, Larry, tell us what happens next week so we could be a hero with our girlfriends. And, I said, no, I can't do that. And they said, well, even though with the food shortage, we could bring you tomatoes. I'm like, okay, let me tell you what happens next week.
Larry Namer is the co-founder of EEntertainment Television, a network that redefined pop culture and reached 142 countries. But his journey did not start in a boardroom. It started in the manholes of Brooklyn, splicing cables for $90 a week. From launching HBO and Cinemax to pioneering content in Russia and China, to now shaping the next wave of storytelling through AI, podcasts, and social impact. Larry has never stopped innovating. He's received a Hollywood Lifetime Achievement Award, just released his new book, Off Script.
Find something you're good at and then work your butt off until you become great at it.
Any advice that you can give?
Stop listening to these follow your passion people.
The more you know, the more the unknown grows. I am Jitesh Vaswani, your host, and together, let's take this journey beyond the known. Larry, I welcome you to Beyond the Known.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. The story of E, is purely entrepreneurial magic, right? But I want to go back to your early days when you were in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, and you were in the manholes. And cable network wasn't very exciting, right? Like, especially splicing cables. Like, what was it about that got you into it, attracted you to it, and how did you start?
Well, I was the first kid in the family to ever go to college. So I graduated with a degree in economics and then realized there weren't a heck of a lot of jobs out there for economists and stuff. So I took what I thought was going to be a temporary job. Mm-hmm. I said, well, I knew someone in the electrical workers union. They said, we just organized this thing in Manhattan. It's called cable TV. I'm not sure what it is, but here's the name of the shop steward. Go see him and tell him the union sent you. So I did that, and they gave me a job literally going under the streets of Manhattan, putting the wires together for $90 a week. And, I was doing that, and, the people in charge were going, hey, kid, how did you know how to use the equipment so quick? It usually takes people a year, and you're doing it in a week. And it was literally as simple as reading the instruction booklet. And so I kind of worked my way up rather quickly. And, as again, thinking it was going to be a temporary job. So I went from an assistant splicer to a splicer to a construction worker to an installer to a serviceman. So I kind of went up the ranks really quick. So I never had time to sit back and go, why am I doing this? I thought it was temporary. So I just kept going with it. And then Time Incorporated, the big magazine company, they bought the company. And so then you had all these Harvard and Yale's that were really looking at how do they migrate Time from being a publishing company to becoming a media company over 10 years. And, somebody in HR realized they hated somebody who actually has an economics degree there. So I kind of became that interface or translator between all the technical workers and the all the time inkers.
Wow, that's a very interesting turn of events. So you went from such humble beginnings to then being a leader at Time, and then you were part of how HBO came to life. What were some of the things, like early leadership lessons, that you learned as you were progressing on your journey?
Well, it was actually interesting because I was, I think I was like 23, and, the union leaders, they were going into their first contract negotiation with the Time Inc. folks, and they said, hey, kid, you know how to read and write. We're going to put you on the negotiating committee. So literally, they put me on the negotiating committee, negotiating a labor agreement with all these Time Inkers and stuff. And the agreement came out, it turned out really well. And so afterwards, they said, this was great, we love what you did. and they ended up at making me the vice chairman of the cable TV workers.
Wow.
At 23, which was bizarre because now literally everybody who's in the cable business was under that umbrella. So I really learned a lot about labor.
And what year was it in? Sorry, I didn't interrupt.
God, that's got to be 1974 maybe.
Wow. Okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry. Keep going.
Yeah. So by doing that and being, on the labor management side, I learned really a lot about labor and negotiating and stuff like that. And, eventually timing put a president in to the company who actually a guy named Nick Nicholas, who ended up going on eventually to become the chairman of Time Warner once the merger happened. And he kept saying, Larry, you got to come into management. I'm like, no. And then finally he convinced me. So it was really good because I grew up in that other world. So I was able to relate to the workers and the union much better than most people could.
Wow. Okay. So then now you're at Time Inc., right? Like, so now you're working in the media industry, and how did the idea to form EEntertainment come into being?
Well, it was not exactly the media industry. I mean, we were basically like a utility.
Yeah.
We were building this cable system throughout Manhattan.
Got it.
Everything had to go underground.
Yeah.
Because Manhattan has no telephone poles. And then, right around 1980, all the big cities in the U.S. started to realize that cable TV was more than just good reception if you lived in rural areas. So all these big cities wanted cable. But the caveat was they didn't want the cable to go on telephone poles because it's ugly. Mm-hmm. They wanted them to go underground. So a Canadian company won the franchise for Los Angeles.
Okay.
And it was going to be the biggest, most advanced cable system ever built at that time. But it had to go underground. Well, the only person around who knew how to build underground was me.
Okay.
So I ended up, they called me up. It's a Canadian company, and they had a recruiter call me, and I'm like, no, I'm a Brooklyn kid. I'm not coming to La La Land. That's not for me. And then finally, the chairman of the company called me and said, listen, we really want to talk to you. And I said, I have no interest in your job whatsoever. And he said, listen, I'll fly you out to LA first class. I'll put you in the Bel Air Hotel. I need an hour of your time. And, so I did that. And at first I was just an idiot. I named like 4 times more money than I make in New York and stuff like that. And he just said, you're out of your mind. And I went, yeah, you're right. And I ended up going back to New York. But then they, like 2 weeks later, they called me up and said, what you're asking for is crazy, but how fast could you be here?
Wow.
So then I kind of had my foot in my mouth. So I went out to LA, and I was building I was 30 years old. I was the youngest general manager of a major cable system in the country. And building the first 61-channel two-way interactive cable system ever built. But, when you're a Brooklyn kid and you come out to California, all your neighbors and your friends and your workers are all going to parties and premieres and doing all this stuff. So I called up the studios and said, hey, I want to get on those lists. And they said, no, you're a utility company. You're like the gas company. We're not putting you on the list. But then I met someone, I think he's from a marketing guy from Universal Pictures. And I said to him, I really don't understand. The most effective marketing vehicle you have is a movie trailer.
Right.
That 2 minutes. I said, but yet the only time I ever see the movie trailer is when I'm in the movies. I said, wouldn't you want me to see that when I'm in my house to make me want to go to the movies? And they said, yeah, but it's too expensive. I went, tell you what, I'll put those on TV for free. You put me on those lists for all those parties and premieres. We put it on. We had a channel literally called the Trailer Channel. Mm-hmm. And but when we started doing audience surveys, we go, what's your favorite channel? They go, oh, we love CNN, we love ESPN, we love that Trailer Channel. And I'm going, wait a second, I'm getting the best 2 minutes of a $50 million movie. Then that movies are only 50, and people love it. And then the Canadian company actually sold out, and they wanted me to go to Toronto. And I was like, no. I didn't go from like New York to LA to go to Toronto. I said, I'm done with cold.
Right.
That's not happening. So me and my friend Alan Marufka, we were kicking around ideas because Alan was also from the East Coast, and we were saying, let's think of something to stay in L.A. And we started playing around with this idea of doing, back then, we were calling it MTV of the movies. We said if, MTV could take music videos, which they get for free, and they stand the host in front of a green screen going, and Madonna has a new video, we could stand a host in front of a green screen and go, and Schwarzenegger has a new movie. So we thought we were really smart. We wrote a business plan, and then I think the going rate to start TV networks was somewhere between 60 and 100 million. But after 3.5 years of everybody saying, it's a good idea, but, people don't start TV networks. Only big media companies can start a TV network. And
Right.
after 3.5 years, we didn't raise 10 cents. But then by a total accident, we met someone who was at a bond house on Wall Street that was just starting investment banking. And we went there and we pitched the guy, and he goes, I really love it. I used to be the entertainment reporter for my college newspaper.
Yeah. Okay.
And he goes, I really want to do it. And I'm like, okay, could you give us more like the 100 million so we could do everything we have planned? Then he goes, oh, no, I'm only allowed to sign for 2.5. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with 2.5? It costs like minimum 60.
Right.
And he goes, well, that's all I can sign for. Well, after 3.5 years, and I think I was down to about $60 in the bank, just said, you know what, fine, we'll do it. So we took $2.5 million, and I had a friend who was teaching radio, television, film at University of Texas in Austin. And I called him up and I said, Brian, do you have any kids that need intern jobs for the summer? And he goes, yeah, we had trouble placing kids this year. I said, send me all you got. And so he actually sent us 31 interns. So, I mean, what's really odd is, in E now, 142 countries, valuations up, I don't know, 7 billion last I looked. And but people don't realize that it didn't start from a big media company, and literally started with 11 employees and 31 interns.
Wow. And then I think there is a quality, like I observed when you were describing your story, like you definitely have that, like asking for 4 times the money, for example.
Yeah.
Right. What would you call it? Like, you have that go-getter attitude, right? Like you say what's on your mind.
Well, it was, quite honestly, at that time, it was more about just coming up with a number that I knew we would never accept. I said, I got a free trip to L.A. and can't wait to go back to New York.
Yeah.
But that attitude kind of developed over time.
And then also another thing I noticed was, they say like luck is hard work plus timing. There's a lot of hard work involved, right? Like in setting up a company with just $2.5 million, which usually costs $60 million or more, with interns, with just 11 employees. There's something about it. Like, what can new entrepreneurs who are just starting out learn from that phase of your life?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of ingenuity. Sometimes hardship and sometimes lack of money leads to the best ideas. I mean, we didn't have enough money to buy broadcast equipment, so we literally bought TV equipment from a company that was using like consumer equipment for doing sales training tapes and stuff like that. So we did that. Everything looked pirate because we couldn't afford we couldn't afford to look like NBC or ABC. But then what was really catching people's eye, people were like writing in, they going, oh my God, it looks amazing. Like, it looks like it's pirate TV, that we're watching something we're not supposed to. And we're like,
right.
Okay. And, then again, without a lot of money, we had to be very, very creative on the programming. So at first we used movie trailers because we're getting them for free. And we had hosts and we'd stand them in front of a green screen and we'd introduce stuff. But we would slice and dice it so that we didn't just say this week coming to the movie theater. We would then have, here's the independent films, here's the foreign films, here's the horror films and stuff. So people who love movies and that all they would normally get at 20 seconds about a movie on Entertainment Tonight, all of a sudden we're getting full half hours or 1 hour's interviews with the directors and the people who make the music. So people who love movies really love that stuff.
Right.
And, and then the first TV show, when we started to get a little traction, I mean, once we went on the air, it was funny because people would say, oh my God, you should have told us that's what you wanted to do we would have given you money 3 years ago. But we grew. We were the fastest growing cable network in the world, actually. We were in 14 countries in the first year. And once we started to get a little bit of a revenue stream, we started to think, okay, we could do more than just show trailers and, have a host in front of a green screen. So the first show, again, having to be low budget, was a show called Talk Soup. And, when I first talked to people about that, our production people, they were like, Larry, you're out of your mind. You can't do a TV show that makes fun of TV shows. And I'm like, why can't I do that? And, it sort of launched the careers of many people, from Greg Kinnear and, and Aisha Taylor. And that show, which everybody said could never work, ran 26 years.
Wow.
So
I think disruption, like leading with disruptions, was always part of your routine almost at that time, right? Because like you said, like the videos kind of looked like piratish, right? But also it was new at that time. It was different at that time. It was out of the ordinary, right? So was that quality in you? Like, did you develop that over time? Was it something that you were instilled with just because of the hardships, or were you also taking mentorship opportunities or learning from the entrepreneurs of those times?
Well, there was really no mentors that that preceded us, but having a brain, but also coming from Brooklyn.
I love that, having a brain.
Coming from Brooklyn, and not everything on TV then about Hollywood and celebrities was very serious. It was Entertainment Tonight, and they would give 20 seconds, and they would deal with Hollywood like it was rocket science.
Right.
Yet I looked at it, and Alan, we had the same feelings. It was like, Hollywood is funny stuff. Don't make believe that it's rocket science or you're curing cancer and stuff. So we treated it very comically. And stuff like things like Talk Soup, making fun of TV shows and stuff. People that said, you're out of your mind. That's crazy. But it resonated and it went well. And, then the second one after Talk Soup, Alan and I were in an elevator in New York, and we met this radio guy, this tall guy who kept saying, oh, you got to come and see my radio show. And we were like, radio's been dead 40 years. What are you talking about? And we went and looked at it, and then I went back and talked to the crew. I said, okay, I want to put cameras in this guy's radio studio. And they were like, Larry, when you came up with Talk Soup, we thought you were crazy, but this is really crazy. That guy turned out to be Howard Stern. Wow. And, Howard obviously did quite well.
Right.
And, but we looked at it differently. We didn't look at it as a radio show. There used to be an old TV show here in the U.S. called WKRP in Cincinnati, which is basically about an ensemble cast that worked at a radio station. And when we looked at the Howard show, we said, this is the reality TV version of WKRP in Cincinnati. That obviously did real well. And then I think the thing that really put us over the top was we applied for press credentials, to go to the Academy Awards.
Right.
And we were rejected. They said, oh, no, you're like a utility, you're like the gas company or the phone company, we're not letting you in. And, again, being a Brooklyn street kid, we literally climbed over the fence. We snuck in.
Wow.
We were on the red carpet. And, again, you had Entertainment Tonight doing the usual, so, Mr. Cruz, tell us about the next Mission Impossible. Yeah. And we were there like kids in a candy store going, Tom, those are amazing shoes. Where'd you get those? Yeah. And, and then when people watched it, they were like, we felt like we were watching something we're not supposed to. I mean, little did they know we climbed over the fence.
Hey, a quick pause. If you're listening to this and thinking, I need more peace in my day, more clarity in my mind, then I'll really encourage you to check out The Art of Living. The Art of Living offers a technique called Sky Breath Meditation, used by CEOs, pro athletes, and high performers around the world to recharge their energy, clear that mental fog, and reset the nervous system in minutes. They offer programs both online and in person. It is science-backed and it works. Head to artofliving.org to learn more.
Okay, that's great. And then you eventually scale this, right? Like to Russia and China. And it looks like your style and this this new way of doing things was also universal, right? Like how did you take it beyond the United States, and how did you appeal to international markets?
Yeah, well, with E, it was kind of interesting because when you looked at cable TV in that era, the early days or the earlier days of cable TV, you had things like the Weather Channel and things like that. So if you live in Pennsylvania, you were interested in the local weather. But the one thing that we were doing, which we realized was global, was we were focusing on celebrities in the entertainment business, which was universal. So again, we grew to 14 countries in the first year. And then, eventually now we're, 142 countries and stuff.
Right.
People love celebrities and stuff. So you just kept widening because Hollywood, at least in my mind, stopped being a geographic place, but really became a state of mind. It was kind of a measure of quality. It was a measure of creativity. But it's not like you have to come to Hollywood to make movies anymore. You could literally take your iPhone and go to, West Africa tomorrow and make a movie with your iPhone.
Yeah.
So we always embrace technology. We embrace the diversity of it. And so E grew, but then, I started as a favor to a friend when the Soviet Union was still around. A lawyer friend in town had some clients that were doing merchant banking, and somebody proposed a deal to them. And the lawyer said, Larry, would you go there and tell me whether you think it's a real deal? Because it was media. And I went there and it wasn't real, but I kind of fell in love with it. So my stuff in Russia wasn't E. It was kind of like my hobby at the time. So I realized that, the wall was coming down and that eventually that whole system was going to change. And it was hard times there. There were food shortages and money shortages, and, the central government disintegrated, and nobody knew who was supposed to do what tomorrow. And I just said, they have so many problems here. They got to stop watching bad news before they go to sleep every night. So we brought in soap operas. We said, okay, this will be mindless television. They could have a beer, sit on the couch, go to sleep, and, tomorrow will be a new day. And so we started with soap operas there. And again, separate from me, this was not part of me. It was a company I started called Comspan. And very quickly, our soap opera became the #1 TV show in the market, which, again, not rocket science. I mean, you could either watch our show or watch bad news.
Right.
I mean, there was no question what people were going to want to watch.
Yeah.
And so that show actually stayed. We were the #1 TV show in Russia for almost 11 years. We were on 5 days a week. And when we started, we were getting 80% audience share.
80% audience share is huge.
It's beyond anything, it's crazy. I mean, to the point where it became this national phenomenon. There were food shortages there and times were really tough. But if you went to go to like a store at 7 o'clock at night when the show was on, the women in the store literally would lock the door and people would line up outside and the women would watch the show. And then at 8 o'clock, they would open the door and let people back in to buy. It was just crazy popular. And, for me, it was kind of interesting because everybody loved the show. There's so many people. And, then Russia was just crime-ridden. It was controlled by the mafia and stuff. It was kind of in that interim period before they really organized a new government. And, the mafia guys, all had girlfriends that loved the show. And, they were just unbelievably kind to me. They go, Larry, tell us what happens next week so we could be a hero with our girlfriends. And, I said, no, I can't do that. And they said, well, even though with the food shortage, we could bring you tomatoes. I'm like, okay, let me tell you what happens next week. So it was kind of an interesting time to be there. And like I say, Russia was kind of a hobby for me. But then I met the mayor of St. Petersburg, who said, we're not getting money from Moscow anymore for the children's hospital and the orphanage. And literally these kids are starving. Could you help me start a music festival so we could raise money for them? And I went, well, I don't really know music. And he goes, well, you got to know more than I do. And I said, all right, that's probably true. And so we started this thing called the White Nights Festival, which we would literally raise in 6 days, every June 16th to 21st, raise 100% of the budget for the orphanage and the hospital.
Wow. So, you have always been good at, like, what you call is using the brains where somebody might be ingenuity, right? Like, so you've always been good at spotting these trends, right? Especially in the media industry. Like, for example, like you shared the Russia story where people were only getting bad news and they needed some positivity in life. They needed something to just turn off their brains and not be worried about tomorrow. Now, in today's world, right now, present moment, we have AI that's coming in. We have podcasting that's booming. What do you think is the next move, or what do you think is going to be successful now in the media world?
Well, I've always embraced new technology and stuff, and I've always been one not to think of how the audiences were, but how the audiences are. I mean, so now when I have a big company in China, and we do a lot of stuff there, and we've been doing short form 2-minute. We've been doing TikToks literally from the beginning.
Right.
In China, my company, we do TV, film, internet content. We do immersive. I don't know if you've seen here, immersive Van Gogh and all these.
Right. Yeah.
We buy up those rights and we show them all over China. So we're very much into how you match new technology with audience tastes and needs. And I'm a huge fan of AI. It wasn't always popular in Hollywood to say that because everybody's still worried that it's going to put everybody out of a job.
Right.
And it's not going to put everybody out of a job. It's going to make everybody's job more efficient and easier.
I agree.
And while some jobs will go away, other jobs will be created.
Right.
I mean, to give you a good example, if you were to say to me, can you create the scenario for a TV series about coffee cups or whatever the subject is, to do the research and do the PowerPoints and the presentations and all that stuff, it used to take me 5 days to do that. Simple treatment. I mean, not the scripts or anything. But now, using GBT, at the beginning, it was only GBT. Now there's a zillion. It would take me 30 seconds to do it. It would take me an hour to clean it up because it's never perfect.
Right.
So it would take me an hour to clean it up. So now in literally 1 hour, I'm doing what used to take me 5 days.
Right.
And I try and explain to people, I go, how could you not love this? I mean, as human beings, we're all on this planet for a fairly limited amount of time. And, some of us will make it to 90, some of us will go at 70. But, the most important thing we have is our time. I said, so if I could sell my show for the same amount of when it used to take me 5 days, if I could sell it for now taking an hour, I said, why wouldn't I love that? I mean, I could either do more of them and make more money. I could play with my little grandbaby. I could learn how to speak Spanish. I've reclaimed the most valuable asset that we as human beings have. And technology doesn't go away. I mean, you go back 100-something years and, America used to be a land where we used to have horse ranches and all over, and they wanted everybody to have a horse and buggy, and they weren't real happy when somebody invented the car. And I just take people to the window. I go, let's look out the window. Tell me how many horse and buggies you see and how many cars you see.
Right.
I said, technology is going to march on whether you like it or not. I think all over, we have our politicians who don't understand technology and they're afraid of it. So we don't have the laws and the regulations in place that deter people, or at least put up a deterrent so bad people know there's a consequence for doing bad things.
I agree with you. Like, I think technology has to be embraced. I'm a technologist myself. For your reference, I design chips that go for aerospace and that kind of applications. And this is something that I love doing. Like, this is my passion. But I've heard you say also, like, not to necessarily make your passion as your career, right?
Yeah.
Like, could you expand a little bit more on that?
Sure. I think a lot of people, when you look at entrepreneurship,
Right.
I think, for years and years and years, all people have been hearing is follow your passion, follow your passion. I mean, to me, follow your passion is a quick way to end up not being able to pay your rent and buy food. I think a lot of people mistake their hobby for their passion. I mean, in my case, I love cooking. I've been cooking since I'm 12. I mean, so if I followed my passion, I'd be working in a restaurant somewhere, like cleaning the dishes after I cook. But if you, the advice I give to people is find something you're good at and then work your butt off until you become great at it. And then that will become your passion. And then the money you make from that will enable you to keep following your hobbies and to be able to afford that and pay the rent and get the kid through college and all that stuff.
That's incredible advice. I'll definitely take it to, apply it in my life as well. And, so you're very successful, obviously. Success also comes at a cost, right? Like on the way, like, I've heard many successful people, they have to sacrifice a lot of other things, right? What was it for you? What did you have to sacrifice to get here?
Well, I think early on it was sacrificing, closeness to family. My older kids, when they grow, I was away a lot. I was in Russia and traveling all over the U.S. and helping E grow. So you do miss a lot there. But then, you kind of get to the point where you realize that stuff was actually more important than, you could just keep making money. And at some point you make more than you could possibly spend ever. So I think it's mainly missing family and stuff like that, and then just indulging and going back on your hobbies and your passions,
right?
And that stuff. I think you really need a well-rounded life as opposed to just a business-focused life,
right? And how important is family to you now? Are you spending more time with them?
Oh yeah. No, now it's well, I kind of had this defining moment with. When my older son, John, was 15, he was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. But he's great.
Okay.
We literally took him all around the world, alternative this, alternative that. There was supposedly no cure for what he had. John just celebrated his 20 years cancer-free.
Wow. Congratulations.
And stuff. But
great.
There's nothing like being told your kid is in danger to make you go, wait a second, what's really important in this life? And, while work always still is important, but you begin to realize that there's so much more that you really need to be focused on and paying attention to. So that was a pivot for me. That was the turning point where I said, you know what, I can't ignore that stuff anymore. I really have to pay attention to it. So I've been doing it ever since.
We were talking about Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar earlier. So I just remember this. He used to say this very often when I worked with him. He used to say, a lot of people, they would spend half their health making up the wealth, and then they end up spending half their wealth to recoup back that health.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and everything seems to work until health is not there, and then everything else is in the back burner.
Yeah, and like I said, when John got sick, that was kind of a wake-up call for me, and I realized that, a lot of, with meditation and stuff like that. For me, I've never had to do like psychiatry or anything like that.
Right.
My meditation is in the kitchen. When I get stressed out, I cook.
Right.
And it's the same exact thing. It just takes me to another place and lets me just think and clear my head and stuff like that. And then exercise.
Yeah.
I exercise 6 days a week and stuff. And, especially now, when you kind of get up there in age, I notice like all the people I went to school with, they got canes and walkers and stuff. And I go, no, that's not going to be me. And I'm literally in the gym. I'm an hour a day in the gym 6 days a week.
Very inspiring. And, this kind of is like a good segue. You mentioned that you love cooking, and your new book, Off Script, is a combination of like recipes and then also a memoir to your own life. Could you talk a little bit more about this book?
Hey, people have been after me to write the book for the longest period of time.
Right.
And, I just refused to do it. I said, I'm not ready to even think about the last chapter yet. So no, I'm not doing it. But then, my daughter had a baby who's now just hit his 18-month
Congratulations
thing.
again.
And I said, I really want my grandchild to understand me from my voice as opposed to listening to someone else. So I said, okay, I'll write the book. But again, my real passion has always been cooking. But when you look at my career, my life, you pretty much could break it up into like 7 or 8 year chunks, and very, very different. It's almost like I reinvent myself every 7 or 8 years. And so I said, I'm going to do anecdotes of the stories during each of those periods, my Brooklyn years, my Manhattan cable years, my Valley cable years, my E years, my Russia years, my China years. And I'm going to match those with the recipes that inspired me during the time. So yeah, the book is somewhere between a memoir and a cookbook.
That's beautiful. What do the next 7 years look like for you?
Spending a lot of time in Asia and stuff, and starting to look at doing some stuff in Africa. I'm, again, huge fan of technology and stuff. I think not just for entertainment, but I think if you kind of match AI with holographic, you can make tremendous impact on the education system on a global scale. I mean, I'm on the advisory board of the Einstein Foundation and stuff, and when Albert died, he left all of his IP to Hebrew University in Tel Aviv. I said, what if I can, I mean, if you go to a college campus and you go to a lecture hall, you know, it's usually one boring professor talking to 500 kids who look like they're sleeping.
Right.
I said, but what if I could have Albert Einstein teach the theory of relativity and stuff, so I can make a hologram of Albert.
Right.
And then by using AI, I can make him interactive. So I could beam him into any place in the world. He could speak the native language, and then he could actually conduct the thing and answer questions and stuff. I said, but if the theory works, then you could find the best teachers of any subject.
Right.
And they could teach not just the university that they're at, but they could be teaching the world. So you literally have the technologies out there that could level the playing field of education across the globe, which I think if you look at the state of where we are today, if we could level the field a little bit, it would definitely stop some of these crazy wars and all this other stuff that goes on.
Yeah. And 23-year-old Larry, if he was looking at your life right now, what would he say to you?
I don't, there's not a lot. I don't really have a lot of regrets for stuff.
Yeah.
I would, early days, I'd pay a little more attention to family and stuff like that. But, again, when you're just getting out of college and stuff, your first 10 years are going to be based on building a career and stuff, because it's all new and you've got all these expenses that your parents used to cover your rent and your food and stuff, and then you realize that they're not doing it anymore. So I don't really have a lot of things where I look back and go, I would have done this different.
Right.
A little more attention to family, a little more attention to health and wellness back then. Because again, I was working 14, 16-hour days and stuff like that.
Any last advice for our listeners? Anything for young entrepreneurs? Anything for young college kids? What can they learn from your life, and any advice that you can give?
Well, I think the most important thing is this whole thing. Stop listening to these follow your passion people.
Yeah.
Because I see friends and, and their kids follow their passion, and, they're still living at home and stuff. It's just, find something that you really like, that you're good at, and just, you got to put the work in. You got to just work your butt off and become great at it. And then you'll become passionate about it. And then it gives you the financial wherewithal to do all these other things that are more your hobbies.
That's wonderful. So for all our listeners tuning in, I want to recommend that everybody get Larry's book, Off Script.
Yeah, it's called Off Script, Never Follow the Crowd. It's at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and stuff, but you can get online really easily.
Wonderful. Thank you, Larry, for spending this time with us. We truly appreciate you for taking out the time and talking to our listeners. This was Beyond the Known, and this is Larry Namer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, a quick pause. I want to share a resource I've personally trusted for years. And when it comes to living well, not just in moments of meditation or reflection, but in everyday life, what we put into our bodies matters deeply. And that is why I love Shri Shri Tattva. It's a brand rooted in authentic Ayurveda, from daily wellness supplements to natural personal care, all crafted with ancient wisdom and modern purity. No shortcuts, no hypes, just products that support real well-being from the inside out. For me, it's all about alignment between what I practice and what I teach and how I live. And Shri Shri Tattva helps me bring some of that care into my daily routine. You can explore their offerings at shrishritattvausa.com. I highly recommend checking them out. The link is also in my description below.
I want to share something I've been personally loving. Shankara's Ghee Sutra is one of those rare products where ancient wisdom meets modern skincare. It's crafted from ghee that's churned 10,000 times. Yes, 10,000. Blended with Ayurvedic botanicals like hibiscus, bamboo, and it penetrates deep, up to 7 layers, to nourish, hydrate, and bring your skin back to life. No harsh chemicals, no surface level fixes, just deep, authentic care from the inside out, like everything we talk about on this show. You can check it out at shankara.com, and trust me, your skin will thank you. The link is also in the description below.